Today, I'll be presenting a systems-level approach to optimizing human health and performance. In this training program, we'll be making micro-adjustments to muscle and joint positioning based on sensory feedback that is providing us information about the quality of our movement. We receive this information through sensory receptors, which are found throughout the body, such as the eyes, ears, skin, heart, brain, muscles, among others. In fact, your entire experience of life is filtered through the lens of sensory receptors. By converting environmental stimuli, light, sound, chemical, etc., into your sensory experience of the world, you can see, hear, plan, act, and move. As it relates to movement, sensory receptors in your muscles detect changes in its length, or simply sense muscle stretch. With this information, the brain creates internal maps or representations of your body and environment, allowing you to sense the positioning of your muscles, joints, ligaments, and tendons in a three-dimensional space, which is known as proprioception. Meanwhile, other receptors detect changes in tension and pressure throughout the body, which allow you to localize the sensation of pain during movement. This is known as nociception, which is your sensory awareness of pain. All of this sensory information, or proprioceptive and nociceptive feedback, is integrated and analyzed in the central nervous system, consisting of the brain and spinal cord. In effect, sensory information is merged with motor information, which we can refer to as sensory-motor integration. Thus, we have a continuous loop of communication between our brain and body. At the level of the spinal cord, sensory information about our movement is collected and analyzed by local circuit neurons or interneurons, which control the excitability of your muscles. In this way, interneurons modulate motor activity by increasing or decreasing muscle activation. This brings us to our first main point. That is, neural signaling to the muscles is influenced by body position due to sensory-motor integration. When you move incorrectly, you tend to place excess stress or strain on localized regions of muscle and connective tissue structures. As a protective mechanism, interneurons in the spinal cord typically respond by decreasing muscle activation to effectively reduce the pressure and tension in these localized areas. Meanwhile, the brain takes all of this sensory information about your movement quality into account and determines the next course of action. The brain notices, hey, we've got a lot of tissue damage in these localized areas. So it sends in a cleanup crew of inflammatory signaling molecules known as cytokines, which mediate immune responses. According to Nielsen and Peterson, the first phase of the immune response to exercise is pro-inflammatory and serves to clean up tissue damage, while the second phase is anti-inflammatory and promotes tissue repair and regeneration. Acute or transient elevations in cytokines appears to be beneficial for the tissue healing response. However, chronic upregulation of pro-inflammatory cytokines appears to be detrimental to recovery. Now, you're likely going to fall somewhere on a continuum of this inflammatory spectrum, which is dependent on your form or technique. Generally speaking, the worse your form or technique is, the more likely you are to create excessive tissue damage from exercise. As a result, the brain sends in a larger cleanup crew of these pro-inflammatory cytokines to initiate tissue cleanup mechanisms. This often leads to overactive pro-inflammatory immune responses, characterized by excessive muscle and joint inflammation, with the also familiar feeling of muscle and joint soreness after exercise. Mistakenly, some individuals gauge the quality of their workouts on this level of soreness. However, this is a terrible metric for workout quality, as excessive muscle and joint soreness is more indicative of the body's response to heightened levels of inflammation. If left unchecked over time, this may eventually lead to chronic, low-grade inflammation, which is a maladaptive inflammatory response and detrimental to your health in the long term. As a result, many individuals buy into the latest anti-inflammatory remedies and therapies on the market. By stretching, foam rolling, icing, and incorporating frequent massage therapy and chiropractic adjustments, we're merely placing a Band-Aid on a larger self-induced wound. Instead of masking the symptoms of muscle and joint soreness, we should determine what's causing the problem and get to the root of it. In this case, the root cause is moving improperly. The wound is the resulting inflammation and soreness. The Band-Aid is the anti-inflammatory therapies, and the cure is improving the quality of your movement. If you're moving improperly, the best thing that can happen is for the body to produce pain signals notifying you that your technique is amiss. Then it's your job to use that feedback to fine-tune and adjust your body positioning until there isn't pain. This is movement mastery in a nutshell. We accomplish this by mastering foundational movement patterns such as the squat, hip hinge, lunge, vertical push and pull, and the horizontal push and pull. By making micro adjustments to our positioning based on sensory feedback during these movements, we optimize muscle and joint positioning, as well as improving the spatial and temporal dynamics of movement. To put it simply, we are moving our muscles through different points in space and time. Muscles are activated at specific time sequences during a movement. Now, imagine you could improve the timing of your muscle activation patterns to the extent that all the muscles for a specific movement fire in synchrony with one another. And again, this is going to be dependent on the micro adjustments you make to your muscle and joint positioning. But one question still remains: how do we do this? One way would be to implement a concept known as co-contraction, in which we use opposite muscle groups to pull ourselves into the proper position. For example, if I were to perform a bicep curl, I would lower the weight by actively contracting the tricep to pull myself into the bottom position, rather than allowing the external load and gravity to dictate my positioning. By maximally contracting the triceps at the bottom of the movement, I take advantage of the elastic properties of tendons. When stretched, tendons store energy that can be used on the initial phase of movement when the tendon passively recoils or returns to its resting position, according to Comey and colleagues. You can think of this like a slingshot. I pull the slingshot back with the opposite muscle group, the tricep, which is pulling the bicep into this stretched and coiled position, where it stores energy that can be used to maximize force production at the onset of movement, or elbow flexion in this case. Moreover, Agard and colleagues have shown that co-contraction can increase the stability of a joint and distribute the load more equally across muscle and joint structures, thereby limiting the potential for musculoskeletal injury. Additionally, by using co-contraction, we can optimize the length-tension relationship of skeletal muscle by preventing excessive range of motion. When muscles are overstretched, joint receptors send this information about the current state of your muscles to the central nervous system. At the level of the spinal cord, there tends to be a decrease in neuromuscular signaling when muscles are overstretched, which leads to reduced tension within the muscles. Meanwhile, in the brain, this information is processed as pain. You have two options now. Make micro adjustments to your muscle and joint positioning until the pain subsides, or you can take the route of no pain, no gain. Everyone moves differently, and exercise is exercise. Yet, our actions have consequences, and the quality of your movement is translated into signaling pathways that regulate immune responses and inflammatory states of the body, as well as muscle growth, repair, and regeneration. Therefore, using sensory feedback and co-contraction to optimize range of motion would be more beneficial than focusing on maximizing range of motion. Lastly, co-contraction plays a role in transferring force throughout the musculoskeletal system. According to Chenot and colleagues, co-activation of monoarticular muscles that only cross one joint and biarticular muscles that cross two joints can enhance performance by allowing the work performed by the monoarticular muscles to be transferred to other joints by the biarticular muscles. For example, I have muscles on the front and the back of my forearm, which allow me to flex or extend my wrist, respectively. If I co-contract the forearm flexors and extensors, the force and energy generated in my forearm is transferred via biarticular muscles to adjacent segments such as the upper arm. Now imagine you do this throughout the entire body. You create full body tension while maximally co-contracting all the muscles in the body. For one, this is going to have a significant potentiation effect on the nervous system by dramatically increasing neural signaling to the muscles, which will enhance maximal force production. Moreover, this improves the body's force absorption capabilities by allowing force and energy to be transferred throughout the musculoskeletal system, while potentially reducing levels of muscle damage and soreness due to the microadjustments you're making to muscle and joint positioning. This completely redefines recovery as you minimize overactive pro-inflammatory immune responses while maximizing the health benefits of exercise. In this way, the human movement system gets an upgrade. It becomes more efficient, working as an interconnected unit or system with all the muscles firing in synchrony to produce purposeful and optimal movement mechanics.